Hi everyone, welcome to the first episode of the Weightlifting Whiteboard. Today we're going to talk about scapulohumeral rhythm and how this contributes to a stable overhead position in both the snatch and the clean and jerk. So if you look in the bottom left-hand corner of the board, you'll see the word scapulohumeral rhythm. Scapulohumeral rhythm just breaks up how much of the 180 degrees of full arm elevation is attributed to glenohumeral movement, so the humerus moving on the glenoid, and how much of it is attributed to scapulothoracic movement, the shoulder blade moving on the rib cage. So to kind of zoom in on that scapulothoracic motion, you'll see that it's important to orient the glenoid. So in order for that glenoid fossa to stay beneath the humeral head and support it. Increase range of motion. Without that scapula upwardly rotating on the rib cage, we wouldn't be able to move our arm all the way overhead. And also the movements of upward rotation, posterior tilting, and some scapular external rotation can really help land that shoulder blade nice and firmly on the rib cage, giving the shoulder a nice stable base off which to work. So if you look at this shoulder blade here, you'll see four X's. The X's furthest to the left is the axis of rotation when the arm is close to the side, whereas that X up by the acromion process all the way to the right there is the axis of rotation when the arm's in full flexion or abduction, like the arm position when we're overhead in the snatch or the clean and jerk. So to kind of zoom in on that fourth X there, you'll see any medially directed force above the axis of rotation would cause upward rotation, as well as any laterally directed force beneath the axis of rotation. So with that in mind, you can see how specific muscles would influence the rotation of the scapula. So you'll see the latissimus dorsi and the rhomboids in red. Because of these muscles' angle of pull, both these muscles would cause downward rotation. That's why we want these muscles quiet when moving overhead in either the snatch or the clean and jerk. In opposition to those muscles, you'll see the lower trap, serratus anterior, and the upper trap all in green. This is because these are the three muscles that promote upward rotation. So we'll talk about the serratus anterior first. It attaches to the medial border of the scapula and kind of wraps around the rib cage there. You'll see that it causes upward rotation, posterior tilt, and scapular external rotation. So I'll put my hand up on the board here so you can get a better sense of these three movements. So upward rotation would be my hand moving like this. Posterior tilt would be my heel of the hand staying close to the board, but my fingertips moving off. So my hand would be tipping like this. And scapular external rotation would be my index and thumb moving off the board, but my pinky staying close. So if we combine all three of these motions of upward rotation, posterior tilt, and scapular external rotation, you could see how that would orient the glenoid fossa in the perfect position to receive a snatch and clean and jerk with that bar right behind our ears. That's one reason why the serratus anterior is so important. Moving over to the lower trap, it goes from the spinal column over to the medial portion of the scapular spine there. Similar to the serratus anterior, it causes upward rotation as well as scapular external rotation, something we just talked about. Moving on to the upper trap, this muscle attaches again on the spine, a little bit higher on the cervical spine this time though, and comes down attaching to the lateral third of that clavicle. When this muscle contracts, it's going to cause clavicular elevation, dragging that shoulder blade with it and causing upward rotation. But it will also cause sternoclavicular compression and stabilization. So that clavicle is the one bony attachment that attaches the scapula to the axial skeleton. So this sternoclavicular compression, while not a primary cause of overhead stability, could be perhaps secondary or tertiary in improving that overhead stability. What's even more important than the sternoclavicular compression, though, is that correct orientation of the glenoid fossa, which is what we're going to talk about right now. So this is a picture of a properly upwardly rotated scapula. So as you can see here, the glenoid fossa, which is just the socket of the shoulder joint, is correctly oriented beneath the humeral head, providing it some support in that overhead position. This is contrary to a downwardly rotated scapula where the rhomboids and lats would both be tight. So as you can see here, that glenoid isn't correctly oriented beneath the humeral head, and it isn't providing any support to that humerus when it's in the overhead position. In addition to this, all scapulas have an acromion process on it, kind of like a roof. So if I drew on the acromion process here, which I'm mimicking with my hand, you would see how that acromion process would be more likely to impinge on the humeral neck here when that scapula is downwardly rotated. That subacromial impingement is not something that we want, doesn't contribute to overhead stability, and increases the likelihood of risk of injury. So two big reasons why we want that scapular upward rotation. So with this anatomy in mind, what can we tell our athletes to try to help improve this scapular upward rotation? Two cues such as reach and push up on the bar should help improve that overhead position and promote upward rotation, whereas cues such as shoulders down and back and lats tight are cues that should primarily be used only when pulling off the floor and not when pushing overhead for reasons we just discussed, and not wanting to promote that downward rotation. Last thing I want to talk to you guys about today, a little bit of a proof of concept here. Looks like my iPad stopped for a second. Is a picture of Lu Xiaojun here. So I know you can see just about every muscle on this guy anyways, but I want you to pay particular attention to the serratus anterior right here and that upper trap right behind his neck there. You can see both those muscles are firmly engaged to give him a nice solid overhead position. That's really what we're looking for. These lats are nice and quiet here, and he's just firmly pressing up on that bar. So that's all I've got for you guys today. Be on the lookout for a So What episode where we start to explain and prescribe some specific exercises to improve upward rotation during the Olympic lifts. And that's about it. So hopefully you guys tune in again. Thanks for listening. Lift heavy, lift often.